Voting in Black America. I mean, what could be more important? Are local elections more important than national elections? Or why do some people choose not to vote? Are they justified? I mean, these are some of the questions that I asked my peers, but first, let's take a brief look into the history of voting while Black in America. The 15th Amendment was passed by Congress in February of 1869 and ratified by the states in February of 1870, granting African American men the right to vote throughout the country. But just as quickly as they received the legal right to vote, it was threatened and violently taken away by white extremist terrorist hate groups such as the Ku Klux Klan. They rounded up blacks in droves, they hung them from trees, they beaten them to death, and even burned some alive beyond the point of recognition. All just to intimidate and keep blacks from voting, because the KKK knew themselves just how much impact voting had on society. The Tuskegee Institute reported from 1882 to 1968 that over 4,743 lynchings occurred in the United States. And of those lynchings that occurred, 3,446 of those people were Black. That makes blacks a total of 72% of the total lynchings that occurred in the 86-year time span. And in efforts to fight back, African Americans would march, protest, and sometimes even defend themselves against the social injustices of lynching and poll intimidation for the next 95 years. In 1965, there were 3 Selma to Montgomery marches planned. The first march took place March 7th with over 500 protesters, led by John Lewis of the SNCC and Reverend Hosea Williams of the SCLC. But the first march quickly became known as Bloody Sunday, as Governor George Wallace refused to protect the marchers and even ordered Alabama state troopers to attack demonstrators. Two days later, on March 9th, Dr. King led a second march on Selma with over 2,500 people without any incidents, until later that night when members of the KKK attacked 3 ministers on the street, beating them with clubs to the point one of them died, by the name of James Reeb.
It's time for us to say to these men that if you don't do something about it, we will have no alternative but to engage in broader and more drastic forms of civil disobedience in order to bring the attention of the nation to this whole issue in Selma, Alabama.
There can and should be no argument. Every American citizen must have an equal right to vote.
The third march started March 21st. Even then, Governor Wallace still refused to protect the marchers, so President Johnson sent 2,000 soldiers, including FBI agents and federal marshals.
These forces should be adequate to assure the rights of American citizens pursuant to a federal court order to walk peaceably and safely without injury or loss of life.
On August 6th, the Voting Right Bill was signed by President Johnson, which provided federal registrars to ensure that the law was implemented by overseeing registration and elections. Before I asked about voting, I asked some people how they felt about the horrific and graphic pictures showing our ancestors being lynched for voting.
As bad as it looks, it's something that I want my son to see as well, to remember this didn't happen so long ago.
Yeah.
This is something that you need to take into consideration when you're trying to figure out if you're going to vote or not.
Kids should be seeing some of these things that are a part of our history, but I would say more than just black kids. I think all kids should be seeing this part of our history so that everybody understands this is what happened. This is what it looked like. Not this watered down, not this watered down version of what you think slavery was or the Jim Crow laws were. Like, this is what it actually looked like. This was somebody's grandfather that got burned to a stake.
I think people can get disengaged because they feel like I go out and vote and nothing ever really changes. I still end up getting high auto insurance rates and high health insurance rates. We don't end up getting the jobs that people claim they want to work for. So I think people just get apathetic and disengaged by what can be legitimately many times a rigged process.
If you take a resident from Flint and said to them that your voice counts, yet and still all of these negative things have happened to your community, and they come from the city managers all the way up to the top to the governor, and everyone knew about it, and they all made decisions that had an impact for these people in a negative way. And these are like basic functions, like just having access to clean water, you know, like telling that person that their vote matters. It's a challenging thing.
Even just electing the mayor of the city is going to affect all of the people, the chief of staff, the people that are appointed. Even right now, we've got district city managers in the city of Detroit. So now electing a mayor is also determining who are the managers in each district in the city.
So that's your water, your school board, your local taxes for your roads. Those are things that tend to affect you more directly, and they absolutely are important.
You have to remember, like when you're growing up, they're teaching you what they want you to know. That's how you pacify people, is if you don't give them the whole story and they can't make their own decision.
The civics part of social studies has been watered down and it's not offered, so many schools do not have that exposure to the importance of voting and even the process of what happens with voting.
For folks who are concerned about jobs, they need to know that there's a full employment, a law that has been offered by people like Congressman Conyers. So he's in office. So if you want to support people who are in office, who support what you support, then your vote matters. Then you hold them accountable for doing what they promised to do. But it's not either one or the other. You can't say I support jobs, but I don't want to bother to vote. If you want to have positive policies in this country, you have to support and promote and vote for positive people who have a history of delivering on what they promise. If we are both empowering kids to use their voice and vote, but then also empowering them to be those politicians that are being voted for, to champion causes that they're passionate about in the political sphere, then I think that we could really increase the number of people in our communities that are active in voting.